Sorry for the clumsy start, but my name is Antani. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Let's see if I can fix that right. Or anyway, so at the National Library of Medicine, for those who are familiar with NIH and NLM, would automatically ask why is NLM in the business of global health? And for those who are not from the US, I should introduce that National Library of Medicine is an institute within the National Institutes of Health, which is the main government granting body for health research funding. There also is an intramural research division within the National Library of Medicine, and it's mainly into informatics. The idea is that biomedical research that's published in the literature can be extracted, can be used for furthering science in general by building applications that can take advantage of the information that's been published in there. This project, on the surface, is of course a pure CADX type of activity with some informatics work, and there's a global health need, and I'll go into that. It's interesting. It's evolved over the years, and I'll try to highlight the nuances that have led to where it is today. But the undercurrent in all of this is that there is a gap between what we do as researchers in terms of building the next fancy widget, the next technique using deep learning or today, or what used to be SVM 5 years ago, or what was random forest in between, and how you deploy it in a real medical imaging application in the field where it can be useful to people. And from you will again rechurn and capture information for informatics and analytics applications for the next generation of research. So, but for this cycle to complete, what you're doing now needs to somehow translate into the field. And it's this gap that is becoming more evident as I and my team work through these hoops in collaboration with the medical professionals, of course. And it is very fortunate that we got an opportunity to actually deploy this in the field and sample back what experiences there are. There's less in terms of data that's being pulled out at the moment, and you'll see why. But it is fertilizing the ground for how the interconnects between medical record systems that we talk about, health record systems that we're talking about today, and computer-aided decision-making systems work together in the field. And so that I tried to spend some time on the title also because it's talking about image analytics, yes, it's talking about informatics and machine learning in this application. I must always give a nod to my team. It's me. I am fortunate to lead this group. Dr. McDonald there is the director of the Lister Health Center, effectively my major boss, and George Tama on the far right is my immediate boss. But it's through Dr. McDonald's interactions with a group in Kenya that this story starts. He happened to be chatting with his colleague and at one point and works in the field there, and he mentioned that our big trouble is that we have a backlog of X-rays that we haven't fixed, and we need analyzed. And it went on in some different directions, but the seed planted itself in Clem's mind. So Clem comes back and says that somebody can do something about this. And of course, me being very enthusiastic 5 years ago, I would be wiser now and say no today. But then I said yes, and we got into this whole game. Over the years, people have contributed and moved on. Alex Carragher on the far left for you is now at IBM. So we have a postdoctoral fellowship program that people come and churn through. And they either become faculty, as in Santosh's case on the far right, or Siddharth's case, one before. Meng has moved on to a different job, but some others linger on, or there's some fresh blood in, as in Shivram's case, whose paper I'll be presenting later today on malaria as well. So the motivation is that TB is a very, very infectious disease. It spreads through the air. It doesn't need much to spread. And when it's comorbidity of HIV. So if you have HIV, you cannot treat HIV if you have TB also. You've got to treat the TB first. Otherwise, the HIV treatment will actually kill you. And it's in that light that they want to have an early and diagnosis. And chest X-ray imaging is not the only way of doing it, but it's a primary way of doing it. It's a common protocol. Because for pulmonary TB, you got to see it as a manifestation on your chest. You can do rapid diagnostic tests. They're extremely expensive, not advisable for a population screening, because each test will be done on every person and repeated over time, so it gets very, very expensive. Chest X-ray is cheap, and you can take it to the masses because you want to screen them, because people may not be showing signs of HIV, but they will show signs of TB through the coughing and such. So as I said, it's a slow-growing but highly contagious disease. It's an old disease. It's been around for 4,000 plus years, that we know of through literature and medical histories. But it actually, the cause was discovered only in the 19th century. And it's, of course, mainly pulmonary, though we can hear about TB of the bone and TB of other tissues. But most common is through the air, and it affects your lungs. And you have the common TB test that's done with your skin test, the PPD as it's called. And many of us have had it done all the time. And it's very sensitive test. So it is, once you get a positive on the PPD, does not mean you have active TB. It just means that protein exists in your bloodstream. An X-ray confirms that you don't have any active TB. You could have had a BCG shot in your childhood, and then you would be positive all the time because, well, you have BCG shot. That protein is there in your bloodstream. So it is a test, but not a definitive test. And Gene Expert is good, but very expensive. And therefore, chest X-ray analysis becomes important. Now, when you do it on a population screening level, it gets hard. Now, this map shows you the spread across the world. And in most cases, I wish I could, I use my mouse. So in most regions here, India, and other places, you have the variants of drug-resistant TB that's spreading now, which itself is harder for treatment, but that's not where we are going. We are going with image analysis discussion. Our story is going to be in Kenya and Southern Africa, and because they are under-resourced, the problems are exacerbated. So when the problem first came to me, I began looking around the literature to what has been done, and very little has been done in terms of image analysis of chest X-rays. But if you look at this image, and this is just a sample of the way TB expresses itself in your lungs. You have lymphadenopathy, you have infiltrates, you have cavitations, which are circle-like figures on the left there. You of course have pleural effusion, which is just the decreasing of the airspace, and you have consolidations, which is a lot of overlap with pneumonia. But if you look at this and you have the normal image on the far left and top, you immediately gravitate toward, hey, this is an image processing solution. I can see patterns in here, therefore a machine should see patterns. Why not? And everything is acquired in a similar way. It's highly structured. You have the rib cage. How wrong can you go? This is an easy problem. And hence my first reaction when I presented to be 5 years ago, that, do you want to do this? Like, yeah, of course. This is gold mine for anybody in computer vision. It turns out not so simple. So we began working on it, but before we had to define what we're to do. And so our goal, of course, was to develop chest X-ray analysis and machine learning algorithms, of course. And that focus on TB, because we very quickly realized that lung X-rays are only showing you what is unusual about them. Not always is it TB. I mean, you can have other biomarkers. You may have fever, shortness of breath, you may be spitting out blood, and then you would be more in the line of having TB. Or cavitations are truer form of TB expression, but consolidation is not. It's pneumonia. So you got to be careful in calling it TB. You can just say, well, you have suspicious indicators in your chest X-ray. We also want to make it useful, so we want to be able to deploy this. And the solution was, well, they wanted to take it to the masses. So it has to be fast. It has to be low cost. It has to work on a truck, which is low power, which has got generator power only in the image on the top right, and be able to give a decision at a fairly, I would say, accurate level, but also enough for a radiographer to work, because there is a shortage of radiologists in the first place. That's the reason why they have a backlog. And so the machine must be able to make a call in the truck if this person who is a patient who has been pulled from the population, sample literally. The truck goes to the villages and it samples the person, and if that person should be sent to the main city hospital, which the impact it has is not so much from the machine learning side is, yes, we should have false negative, we shouldn't miss anybody, and we should have false positive, we shouldn't flag somebody for further analysis if they don't need to go. The latter has a side effect for them economically, because they are in a startup society where the daily wages are like 500 shillings to 600 shillings. In Kenyan money, that's about $6 a day, and the family depends on that. If they go for a treatment and there's a false positive, their family is starving pretty much. So there is a side imbalance where the cost of having a false positive is usually very low for a screening system. It's the false negatives they worry about. They don't want to miss anybody. But here the cost has an added economic cost to it, which was weighing heavily on us as we were devising our algorithms. So when you compute a machine learning algorithm and a decision-making algorithm, you have a cost function in there. What is the bias? Now, in this case, programming the dollars cost into the bias was not something that I was familiar with, and we are still struggling with that, but we are moving on. I mean, that's something I need you to be aware of as you move on. Empath, which is a non-profit there, runs a huge treatment program, has 200,000 plus patients. Now they have gotten better money. They are doing cancer as well as HIV and TB, though HIV and TB remains their main disease focus. And it's a partnership of 11, one Canadian, I think it's one or two Canadian, and remaining American schools. And they routinely send their senior medical students there who are residence stage already, or their faculty who will spend short amounts of time. And there are some long-term faculty there who are spending many years there. And the idea is to bootstrap the local Kenyan resources, if you will, without imposing. So there's a strong undercurrent about, from the history of Kenya, the white man coming in and telling the black man what to do. And so there is resistance to that. So the idea is to get them to treat their own patients and to build the education and research in their environment. And it's succeeding very well. More in the common diseases rather than radiology, however. That's as we discovered. And the area we're talking about is Africa right there. There's Kenya. We're talking about Western Kenya in this case. And it's about a 300-mile swath that you're looking across. About 50 clinics in mostly rural area. And these dots literally, usually when you look at dots on a map, dots only simply signify cities and such, and then there's things in between actually. It never really ends. This is sparse land. There's nothing. You leave that dot and 5 kilometers later you are in wilderness. And you go for a while and there's nothing there, and then there's another dot appears. So it is this main city, Eldoret, and a few other cities are main cities. Other than that, it's all villages actually here. And mostly doing film X-rays. They are beginning to get this year, I believe, some digital X-rays in those areas. But the biggest problem is that they only have about 5 in Eldoret, which fluctuates in terms of radiologists. So even though a machine makes a call, a reading must be done by an expert that will give you, and that's the distinction. A CAD system will give you a diagnostic saying that this person has this manifestation. It does not produce a report. A radiology report has very specific readings on various aspects of your anatomy, and that must be read and must be recorded as such into the health record system. So that is still a challenge, and so what the system is really doing now is becoming more like a triage system. This is a typical healthcare center, if you will, and I have other pictures, but I would call this as a luxury waiting lounge. There's usually otherwise wait in the tree. They built this truck. The interesting thing about this truck from a low cost point is that it is shielded for X-rays. You want it to have it certified as such. And they got around it by actually, I'm going to walk away from this for a second. Just that much. So they got away by having only 5 feet above the truck floor as protected from X-ray radiation, because that itself is 13 feet off the ground. So nobody on the ground would get radiated anyway, and in the truck you don't need to. So as long as nobody in the truck immediately in the cabin or the driver per se, you are reasonably safe. So they got down a lot of reducing the weight, because if you add lining to protect against X-rays, you're adding weight to the truck. If you add weight to the truck, there's a fuel cost. The fuel cost is a cost of the program. It immediately becomes an economic problem from what is otherwise a technical scientific problem. Anyway, so that's the shot you've seen before. That's what it looks like inside the truck, power panel and such. Over the years, we've been trying to work through how to minimize the number of equipment that's in there while making decisions. And it is good that the processors are becoming better, the laptops are becoming better. So we have moved to full digital radiology inside. So this is comparable to any clinic you walk into today in a fancy building. This X-ray machine is a digital X-ray machine. That's a PAC system there and such. And that's my partner in crime there, Dr. Mark Coley, who is a professor of informatics and radiology at University of California, San Francisco. He's been with AMPATH for a very long time, ever since his residency days, and has continued to contribute his time every year toward advancing it. And so he comes in from the radiology side. It's an added advantage that he's a fantastic computer programmer also. And from our side, we bring in the machine learning and other resources. Our system did get noticed after it was rolled out. The First Lady of Kenya, Margaret Kenyatta, Her Excellency, she actually came by, saw the truck, and she said, "It's the coolest thing I've ever seen," which is good, because from a political angle, if somebody recognizes that this work is important, it survives more than the technical glory of it. Anyway, coming down to technology, how does it all work? So the patient shows up, the image is acquired. This is all nothing to do with, you can buy this equipment online, it'll do it. Once the image is acquired, it goes onto the truck, the laptop you saw, and from there onto an onboard PACS. Now, those of you who are in biomedicine would immediately realize the issue that's happened here. At this point, the PACS system has granted its own patient ID. And you have a disconnect with the patient ID that's going to be for this patient in the EMR in the city hospital. So the idea of work lists and which patient is going to be seen that you normally take for granted in your normal visit to a clinic is all lost at this point. At this point, we are still doing a post-facto reconnection. And so that is being worked on right now as we speak. That's the current technical challenge. But the image is acquired into PACS, and the PACS pushes it out through DICOM push into this screening software, which first localizes the regions of interest, that's lungs in this case. And we have done that as well. And then once you've done that, you want to do the classic machine learning bit, extract the features of interest, and decide if that image is abnormal or normal. And then report it to the person on the truck, saying that this person came by, all these names are fake, and you can see they're fake because the chest X-ray is of a woman, and I've highlighted a man there. And everything is made up. So, but it looks like this. It's enough to say red or green as to why where this person should go. Now, once that is done, what is missing in this picture, which is we are working on now, and I'll end my talk with that, is where is the disease? Because people begin asking that question. You just find that the machine is telling you that this chest ray is abnormal. But why is it abnormal? And the average radiographer, who happens to be usually equivalent of, let's say, post-high school, maybe diploma level of education, not in medicine, over the years develop his own sense of normalcy. We are intelligent people, and we see images enough that even you and I may not know anatomy. Over time, we see what's bad and what's been marked as good. And so they develop their own internal models, and then they start asking us questions. Why did the machine say, in my mind, I thought this guy was abnormal, and you're saying it's normal. Why? So why did the machine miss it? And so over time, we are trying to figure out how is the machine learning algorithm deciding something is positive or negative. Anyway, so once the person's flagged, of course, his fate or her fate is determined by going to the city hospital or not. But we transmit the image to the city hospital in the hope to serve as a triage, because we have a ranking now. We know how severe this case is compared to all the cases the machine has seen before. And the radiologist, hopefully, would be able to re-rank and see the more severe cases first. That's at least the goal. Turns out that's not how it happens, but that's still remains our goal, because there are other factors at work, such as strikes and unpaid doctors, and which I'll not go into. So the first step is lung model localization, and that happens by using essentially a radon transform and using shape profiles of lungs to find 5 chest X-rays from an existing collection of images that we have that are similar to the patient X-ray. So on the left is the patient's X-ray, and we find 5 X-rays of whose boundaries, lung boundaries, we know. And since the features that were extracted from the image are recorded, we're able to find 5 outlines. Now these will essentially serve as like a non-rigid registration mask for us that we'll start with and build a patient-specific model. So we know how far off we are from the models that we already have that were image similar to what we began with. And once we have that, we do a graph cuts method to find the actual lung boundary. I'm skipping over the details. If you would like me to go in, I could, but I'm already at 20 minutes and I don't want to run long beyond the point. But offline, I can go with you if you want. Oh, I'm supposed to be clicking this. Hello. There you go. So all's good, and mostly we are fine except for the last 2 examples I put in there. And I don't know if you can see from the back. I'm sorry if it's too small, but I'm going to see if, or not quite. Anyway, so look at this gap here, and that gap essentially tells you that the lung algorithm did exactly what it was told. However, it is wrong. And the fact that it found what is trained as the lung boundary. If you look at the top left image and others along the way, which are mostly normal, lung is airspace. But as you go down here, this also is airspace, except the person has consolidation. So it actually gave up the shape, intrinsic shape of the expected lung, and found something that if you were to extract features from, you would have less of an impact than otherwise. Now, one could say, well, you can look at the lung shape and say if you're right or wrong, and we do take advantage of that. But it is we don't recover from something that is already wrong and that we don't know anything about. At this point, it is found the lung. If you were to capture the features of the lung inside that magenta boundary, you would not get the consolidation at the bottom that are actually going to give you a better decision from the classifier. I combined stage 2 and stage 3 for the purposes of this talk. It is distinct, of course. These are separate processes. You look at hand selected features, or you will actually use deep learning to discover your own features. Either way, the feature extraction and machine learning are kind of related. And we've tried a variety of things. Each of them does reasonably well. They all kind of plateau out mostly over time. But deep learning lately has been giving us better results. And that's just like a heads up. So at least one of you have used of our data sets, but they're publicly available that are used for our research, except for the Kenya ones, because they are flagged by the Kenyan government under the IRB's rules. We can use it, but we can't release them to the public. But everything we get from Shenzhen, China, we have 2 collaborators there who have been anonymizing images and sending them over to us as they go along. Montgomery set is kind of already solidified. We have another set that's the Indiana collection that has no TB but a lot of pulmonary disease. And these are all freely available at our website down there, which you go to OpenEye, NLM, and NIH.gov, or just Google for it, you'll find it anyway. And all our publications that have to do with this work over the years are also at our website in full text. You can grab it if you want to. So now having said that, back to our problems. We also have another issue. The top row shows you the images from China. The bottom row are from the truck in Kenya. And immediately you'll see that there's a quality gap. And I attribute not so much to the fact that it's a truck machine, there's nothing to do with that. It's the radiographer on the truck. I mean, somebody has to set the settings for the body mass, position it correctly, make sure the field of view is correct. All of the QA, which goes into what, if you were to get ourselves imaged in a clinic, you'd end up more like on the top. and less like on the bottom. And this impacts the machine learning algorithm because these are DICOM images, and you've got to now figure out where in the intensity space are we supposed to be. If we go very high contrast, I start beginning crystallizing, I begin having very strong vasculature visible, which means texture, which means abnormalities, and it's not there. If I go too light, then I have a problem of missing things. And so what is the expected normal? If I train on the Chinese data and I test on the Kenyan data, automatically I'm wrong. And so we have this constant problem of how do you mix across data sets as we progress. Broadly, we began looking at this problem as the way the disease presents itself. You have texture-based diseases, which are stuff in your lung, or you have gross shape-based. Now you can go back to the original slide and say, well, you had cavitations. If you use circles, you can't build a circle detector. Well, yes, we can, but then I'd be building a detector for cavitations, building a detector for infiltrates, building a detector for adenopathy and such. Or I could just say, well, group them at a higher level and say, well, everything that has got a texture-like edgy stuff inside the lung will have one kind of class, and everything that changes the lung shape inherently itself is another class. And that takes care of the problem we had with the lung segmentation also. I don't know how many of you are computer vision background people, but if you don't, local binary patterns, if it's familiar, just say yes. If not familiar, I don't see too many hands. Fine. So basically, this looks at tiles or regions of the lung, and it looks at the signature that creates as thresholded by the center pixel in a given mask. In this case, this example is a 3x3 mask, where it is taking the center pixel that's 7 in that example, and thresholding against it, anything that's greater is now 1, and it's not a 0, so you end up with a binary signature, a pattern, that is converted into a decimal that's between 0 and 255, and then you have a histogram for the 3x3 mask, and you slide it across, and you do it for one tile window and do it for the entire lung. So essentially, you have a texture mask over the entire chest X-ray in this case, or any image, if you will. And that's one feature. We also do just plain old histogram of gradients, or a pyramid histogram of gradients, which gives you a scaled representation of the edginess of in a lung presentation. So the one at the bottom is very nice and very powerful because it captures at various scales. We also have the run-of-the-mill features, which I don't go into, Franke filter banks, Gabor filters, the GIST feature, wavelets. These are all easily available from online. We use them varying components of, so we have to go through a cycle of which channels or which frequencies in each of these were important or were most meaningful. We also have shape-based features. This is the outline of a lung from a normal presentation, and you have an abnormal presentation in this case. The point I'm trying to make is that you have a reduced airspace, which can be used now to measure things like size, orientation, centroid coordinates, bounding box. These are all features that will suggest its distance from the normal. Earlier we would do the whole lung with SVM, and it put us in 84% area under the curve, which was not bad, but nothing to. I mean, that was the norm. Being in the 80s is not great anymore in terms of missing people, because even though you can skew towards missing nobody, you start having more like 30 or 35% false positive rate, which is actually 30 out of 100 are going to be going to the clinic when they don't need to go, and that was bad. So a localized classifier, this work was presented in SBI Med Imaging earlier this year, actually, yes. And we took the readings from the radiologists themselves. We talked about the upper lobe, the middle lobe, the lower lobe. And now, anybody who knows, so if you're familiar with chest radiography, in the PA view, you don't see the lower lobe on the right side. It's in the back here. So you are seeing a part of the lower lobe, much of the middle lobe, which is wedged like this, and the upper lobe. But we still faked it, and we converted it into a 6-cell, 6 local classifiers for every cell. Even if one of them is positive, the image is deemed as being disease positive, which is exactly what you want. If you see one nodule, you still have cancer. That's the same idea. And this actually did a significant boost to our results. So if you look at the results from the Chinese set, the image quality is better, the performance is better. As you go to the Kenya set, we were more in the 59-60% with the old algorithm. We saw a boost in sensitivity, and we care more about sensitivity than specificity, but in general, we want both to be higher. And it's markedly worse than the other two, but that's the state of the art that we have with this kind of data. Another approach was taken by Santosh, and he said, well, if you're looking at diseased lungs, and looking at texture, lungs are inherently symmetric, if you will, quote unquote. I mean, we have 2 lobes and 3 lobes, and there's a heart here, and there's no heart here. I mean, all of the above. But in general, they are symmetric. Why can't we look at the edge profiles on both sides and have a sense of a normal edge profile, and a sense of an abnormal edge profile, and we can discover it? And it's very quick as a result. And it's particularly good for severe disease. For not so severe disease, it's something that we are working on, but still possible. Here's an example of radon transform signature from the normal lung at the bottom and the abnormal left lung on the top case. And you can see that you can start having differences there. Here's a spectrogram reflection of another lung with a lot of disease in that case. And you're seeing the difference in the two presentation of the left lung and the right lung. And you have the shape context also, clearly indicating that there's something off when the shapes are looked at gross, not just the internal contents, but overall textures. So this is looking at the outline. The previous one looks more at the outline as well, and this one looks more at all the edginess inside. And you have the PHOG, of course. And here, immediately you start seeing even the boost for the China and India. I'm not presenting Kenya, it's under works right now, but because this paper is under review right now, and that hasn't gone through. But we have China now at 96 area under the curve, India is 93, Montgomery County is in 90. So everything is being seeing a 3 to 5 point boost just by looking at profiles. Can we combine the two ideas? Perhaps we could, but that's something that we've been focusing on as well. Finally, coming to the idea of where is the disease? And this is, so we began looking at our own data and just had worked with Dr. Les Folio of NIH, who spent a fair amount of time going through 360 images, trying to mark wherever they, not just read the image as abnormal, but mark where it's abnormal, which is something that they don't usually do. They will read, and it's very hard. It's like pulling teeth for them to tell them to draw something on an image, because it's not what they're trained. They're think outside the box, think like a machine does. Because they're thinking in terms of anatomy. But he did it, and he actually tagged every type also. And then we stacked all these images up to produce the image on the left. It tells you where the disease mostly occurs, which is correct. TB occurs mostly in the upper lobe. Nothing new discovered here, but it began giving us insights on where we would train our classifiers to behave. That would be explicit training. More recently, we've been working on using deep learning and actually discovering saliency maps from every network layer and seeing how the layer activations take place on a set that's been trained to look for. So we have told it nothing, just give it the box. We do length segmentation, we find the min-max on all sides, and we give it that image and say, well, every layer, what is picking up on? And by the 4th or 5th layer, we start seeing where it is picking up the various highlights. Now, except for that one, and some others, mostly is picking up disease. What the study we're doing right now is this highlight consistent with the radiology readings? What is the disagreement between the highlights and the actual reading itself? It's picking up all the abnormal images, so we are finding the images all right. Question is, are we finding it for the right reasons? Or is it just because we're finding some abnormality that is not necessarily a pathology, but it's dissimilar from the normal? So that is something that we still don't have a good handle on, and we're working on that as well. But the heartening fact is that it does not miss the normals. So people who actually are healthy can go home. And that answers one part of the two-part question. So that was my talk. I'm ending abruptly because I have a lot of stories behind the scene, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. Please throw them at me. Thank you for your attention. Raise your first hand, yes. So this is being done on the entire collection. So India is 70, so 2,500 images or so. So to come back to the problem with chest X-rays is even though they are the most common modality that's been acquired, they are not easily available. People do not want to release their, because of various reasons, you know. Even though you can go through the whole anonymization step and everything else, for those who are interested in this field, Dr. Ron Summers from NIH is, I think, about to release 108,000 images, chest X-rays. They won't have TB, but they'll have all sorts of things that NIH has, which is mainly a research protocol hospital. So you'll see oddities, but you'll not see many of one thing. But you'll see a lot of pneumonia, the classic hospital stuff. So we have another collection of 4,000 images from the Indiana hospital system, and that has gotten old TB in 6 cases. But otherwise, it's the run-of-the-mill X-ray before the surgery that was taken because. So you see CHF, you see some pleural effusion, you see atelectasis, you see adenopathy, but nothing that is, oh, I have 500 retinopathy and I have 400 of this. No, you see like 20 of one and 30 of another. And that becomes a problem actually for deep learning, absolutely. So we have to do a lot of data augmentation. That's the only way. But one thing that we do different from some of the other papers is we actually want to split the data right in advance and augment only one side of it. Not the other, and so have the validation and verification tests as separate people and to blend it a little to augment and then they test. Then there's bleeding going across and with fewer images, deep learning algorithms learn, it's convolution, they pick up all these patterns. So. Except for Kenya, everything is.
Except the Kenya one.
Right.
And for one of the data sets, you had the expert mark the regions of
Right.
interest.
Yes.
So are those annotations available?
Sure. Okay, but so so that is not on the link. But if you're interested, I will send them to you. I mean, they are publicly available. Yes. Have we posted them up there? No, because we have our own paper about that is under review. Usually, I wait until the paper gets out, and then I'll put the setup along with it once it goes into an accept phase. But yes, the short answer is yes, it's available. It's implicitly available, it's not explicitly. Other things you don't even have to ask me. You just go to the website and download it. Earlier, so we went through this classic phase of releasing data where I had an email address up there and I would and you would send me an email, I would say, yes, here's the link. And I'd see a nodding head, they go, I think that she went through that phase. Now we've gotten to the point that it's not worth it. It's our logs, web logs will have exactly how many times. It matters to us that our data is being used. So that's one reason why we have an email control. If I have 500 emails, I know at least there are 500 bodies who are using it in what kinds of organizations. Because from being at National Library of Medicine, there are questions asked upstream. So how is your data helping further science? If I don't, but the web logs do just the same thing. Except I lose connection with the individual. I would not know Priya otherwise. But other than that, it's available for you.
You are doing research which is very impactful, right? So you are taking the computer-aided detection, diagnosis, in the field where,
Right.
we have a shortage of radiologists. So how expensive is to build this mobile application, the track?
Ooh, that's a I wish I could put a number. That how many $100,000 question? So, what is the cost? The cost in terms of the physical acquisition of things, the truck itself, the computer itself, couple $100,000. It's not that much in the grand scheme of things. It is the human component that goes around it. So if you were, let's say, pick a country, you're in India, and you want to start your own little program, then getting the truck and getting all the equipment in and getting the current version of the software, which is freely available from us now or by request, we want to collaborate with people because, as you can see, the data varies from site to site, and so as a research program, we want to involve ourselves in one way or another. The dollars cost is very low, but in terms of, it has taken 5 years to come to this point, 6 postdocs, and so when you add all that cost together, it's a pretty high cost. which is not trivial. But once it is built, and fortunately, since it's built from public money, it is available by request for free. I mean, the example in China, the collaborators there, they are using it. In fact, they are ones who are also pushing us, because they have a very oddball case as far as this. So this was a screening application. Thank you for the question. This is the thing I forgot to say. So in this case, it's the population is coming in. We don't know. There's the prevalence rate of chance that you will have somebody with TB walk in. In China, they want to use it in Shenzhen hospital. They want to use it for the TB clinic. The only people who get referred there are the primary care physician already has determined that these guys are likely to have disease. So we have 95% north probability that this person is going to have HSC. So our machine should do very well, right? Well, it does, but it doesn't, because the machine is set to the prevalence of the training sets it's seen. And that's 50%, this equal chance. We have equally sized sets. And so you get this weird misses. The corrects are all correct, that's not a problem. But there's weird things like, it missed that, really? Huh? Why? And so it sends it back to the drawing board oftentimes, thinking, what did the algorithm miss in this case, which is so glaringly obvious to our eyes? And so we have these, collaboration with other people and making this tool available for them for free it runs on a standard modern laptop now, as you saw. It doesn't need anything fancy. It does need interconnects with, it doesn't need to expect you to have a PAC system. We are not doing the file-based double-click, open a file. We could, but we don't. We actually talk to a PAC system in the hospital system. You can actually, we are a DICOM node, you can push an image to our, and get the results back in a custom DICOM field or a separate text file. It's configurable. Yeah? Yes, yes. So clinical practice, the way I don't know how to frame it. They are being used for clinical purposes. If that's whether that truck is actually making a decision. Also in China, it's a TB hospital. So yes, it's a clinical. Are they being routinely used as a part of the protocol? No, and that's where and that's why when I began my talk, that was my key. The gap between having a tool that works very well and actually convincing a medical practice to adopt it as a part of the protocol, that is a wide gap. They don't, because they don't know why this is right or why this is wrong, to be very honest. I mean, to put it absolutely bluntly, they are not comfortable if the machine is telling them, it's not so much, I mean, you can color this in different ways. You can color this from an economic perspective that a machine is taking my job away. And not really, because this machine doesn't produce a result, a radiology report. So without a report, his job is, or her job is safe. That's not the point. The point is that when they make a reading, they are reading off. This is clear, that is clear, this is not, they're observing this. The machine does none of that. It just tells you, this guy is bad here. I can do that here now. Until now, I couldn't even do here now. But earlier, we just say, this guy is positive. Why? And as a patient, you would ask that of your physician also, why are you seeing this? And you don't see that. So it's the discomfort with not showing what the machine is really doing that they have a problem with. The more, let's say, the braver ones are trying to, in fact, tell us what they want. And we are, believe me, there are many people, so there's this, so in the step out of this into the world of CAD in general, even mammography stops at the point of highlighting at the risk of, so everything is drawn to high sensitivity. You see a lot of markers. In some, it's very confident about it. I'll tell you, these are certainly indicators of some kind of a mass. But the subtle ones, it'll just highlight and say, well, pay attention here and you decide. Because it is stepping back one stop short of actually making a call on it for the same reason. And of course, then you can color this with liability and everything else, of course, all true. But long answer, sorry.
So, a follow-up question. So, I think there are a couple of challenges, right, with this kind of work. One of them you mentioned is, like, and you are working on linking the ID of the patient. So you have data wired to the trust, right?
Right.
And then you have the hospital data. So how are you planning to handle?
Well, it's not that simple an answer for that. For that, you need to go back to the master record. The master record is the electronic health record. So in hospitals, you have, of course, the PACS and the RIS doing the connection to the HIS, the hospital information system, which contains your EMR or EHR, as you will. When you have population studies going on, they usually are using off-the-shelf EHRs. Mind block. There's one that's freely available, and it'll come to me. That doesn't have an imaging component. So you would use run-of-the-mill PACS, and the people in Kenya actually have coded their own work list generator, because that's not only does this truck go out into or trucks now, there are two, that goes into the villages, you also have the situation where doctors are going out to the villages for not radiology reasons, just routine care. And they also need to know which patients they're seeing. Earlier, I talked to the physicians, it was simpler. They would carry a big box of files that their patient support person would have put for them early in the morning before they would go out in this vehicle out to the villages. It was a physical paper-based stuff. They would make paper notes. They may not see the same patient again, somebody else may see it, but the paper notes were the carryover. They were very happy with the system that worked. The paper was getting thicker and thicker, but it worked. Now you have an electronic system, and they magically expect things to arrive on their tablet. Cellular networks are better, so there's Safaricom everywhere and Airtel everywhere, and you can. So which is how this truck is communicating through, in fact, cellular modems to the main thing. But they don't know which patients they're seeing. And so the work list that is being used for that, to answer your question, is being essentially modified to work for to talk to a PAC system. And because they're locked down on the manufacturer, now they can talk to protocols so that the radiographer doesn't have to enter the person's information in there, unless they are walk-ups, in which case they will, and you'll have to have this disconnect anyway. But once the images are pushed back, since they would know which was expected, the mating is a lot easier. Right now it's all manual, but there's only 2 trucks, so it's a lot easier. The truck sees about 30 to 50 patients a day. So on a given outing, they're talking about anywhere between 60 and 100 patients. It's 2 days outing is typical. So it's not that hard to do. It will still work, and they still have backlog. The backlog is not 2,000 images, now it's a few hundred images, but they still have backlog. So we haven't solved the premise that we were set out to do, but that's X-rays. Now, for those who are interested in TB and this kind of work, there is a challenge from Image Clay, or Image Clay, which has a CT data set of TB. Because the normal way in the first world is to do CTs instead of doing X-rays. And you can see the disease behind the bone. And that is hard enough also. So there is a challenge out there. If you want to download a set, go ahead and do it. And go look up Image Clay TB collection, and you'll get that. And it was just the first round of challenge was this year, so it'll continue for many years. So if you're interested, do that, and you leave the world of X-rays and enter the world of CTs, but it's still a challenge. We haven't done anything with X-rays in terms of challenges yet. So. Ooh. So this one is. This one, a deep learning one, and the one with the shape. Both are. So in fact, this, I didn't show you a chart here. I have another chart in the paper which actually we trained on one and tested on another. And we saw numbers did not go down. And then we trained on 2 and we tested on 1. And the numbers in fact got better. So these numbers are not, these are the lowest numbers I want to present. And there are higher numbers than this that we can get to. So the shape-based one and the deep learning one, both are generalizable across disease types and across patient populations. The one that was the hand-built features, that was our first effort going around, is more specific to the kind of, it's what I see in that data set, therefore it's limited by what I perceive as being mathematically sound for this discrimination between normal and abnormal. So increasingly we have become drawn toward either discover your own feature. Even though it's a shape-based feature, we're letting it discover its own feature, its own separation. We're not saying that this is the texture, just that's what's there. Deep learning, of course, is our. This is of course an exhaustive. So this, my malaria talk, I'll go into a bit of that. So we use the same idea for malaria, and we see how you've got to figure out which layer gives you the best decision. So we're kind of putting our fingers into the deep learner and saying, at layer 3, I'm seeing for this kind of data set, I'm seeing the best results, and layer 5 for another. We are not doing transfer learning because we saw a distinction between transfer learning versus customized models. Customized models are much better. Transfer learning, of course, gets you in the game faster, so there's that. Yeah. It does. So essentially, I do a blinded clay. I mean, that is a problem. We haven't gotten around it intelligently. Let me put it that way. We just do a contrast level enhancement. That's adaptive, and we get what we get. But even with that, it's not going down. So we are just saying, fine. You know what? It's a problem that's solved. Ideally, I would rather solve the human problem than the machine than the trying to adjust for an image. Because that shouldn't be the kind of image you should be seeing. So we have a separate channel upstream with the empath people, saying that you may have a guy on the truck, but he needs to be trained. Can't just be firing off whatever KVA rating and getting an image that's essentially it's a low contrast image. That means there wasn't enough X-ray being sent to penetrate the patient and get a good contrast. You can send too much, and you can hit high contrast, so it's a human problem rather than a machine problem. And because we have control on acquisition, and generally it is expected, that image wouldn't survive if there was QA person on the truck. The image wouldn't survive. It would get rejected. You would do a second take on the person. But because first of all, digital X-ray you need very low doses anyway. But with and the image on the top row, which is our clinic, is what you should be expecting. So we are not dealing with the bad image quality problem the way we could. Because we, as image processing people, we tend to go after that. That's, hey, this is the set I've got, let me massage the set until I get the best. Well, that's fake, because the reality is that anybody will walk up with any kind of body mass, and you're supposed to have a good quality image at the end of it. So let's solve the acquisition problem separately from that. Oh, sure. Sure. You'd rather get false negatives, rather. You won't get too many false positives. Because the image quality is so bad, you'll miss the textures won't be contrasted enough. So you'll miss somebody. You get false negatives, more than false positives. Unless you skew it all the way up, which is, but that's manual intervention. We're doing what the machine's doing, and the machine's trained on that set with an expectation of the Chinese set, so it brings it back to some sense of normalcy. No. Thank you. The one in red was the only thing that's been deployed in the field. This is all new work. So both this bilateral symmetry and the deep learning part is brand new. Both are under review right now. It's a keynote talk, and I wanted to share with you guys. The results are good, so I'm expecting mostly positive outcomes of it. But what's in the field is SVM. I listed the others because Bayesian networks, random forests, and MLP are actually using the voting classifier for the shape-based stuff. SVM is used for the other features that the PHOG, Gabor filters, and others are using that. And they all have filters that are going into the features that for SVM classification. It's a binary SMO basically. And deep learning is the new one where we don't worry about any other stuff. So these two are the bottom four. I think of it as two because this is one set, and that's another set. So decision making in deep learning doesn't require any fancy resources. It doesn't was one for one machine. It's a local GPU. The training is the one that so training is happening at our end. So we're not really concerned about that. Decision making is pretty fast. As long as it has a local, reasonably advanced laptop, you're fine. The greater problem really is coding it in a non-MATLAB, non-Python environment, which has to talk to other hospital systems. So that's where the challenges really happen. What?
So one last question.
Sure.
So
Fire away.
Where do you see the field of medical informatics going in the next?
Good question. So I'll give a biased response. Imaging informatics is in its infancy. Although we accept that images are information, as far as informatics papers are concerned, informatics conferences are concerned, you don't see imaging. Imaging plays a secondary role that is a part of an acquisition, and then you compute some decision on that. So this work, to come back to my original point, when it's rolled out and you see, well, what impact did it have on a population study, would be one angle of a informatics kind of survey post facto. It's how did a machine versus a human behave? You can compare the two. And you totally assume that this was a black box. All the imaging work that was done till now was meant for imaging conferences, was never published. And it's a black box, and you saw the outcome of the machine. And you had a human read on that, and how did the two match up? We do that internally anyway, because we have two readings for an image sometimes, for one set. For the Kenya set, I have two readings. Where I would see machine versus either, so I have inter-radiologist disagreements or agreements. And I have machine versus machine, human. And we are at par, we know that, from against one guy. The other guy is new data, so we don't know. But the field, as images become more easily available, I mean in the field of data science especially, you'll see more of this kind of work before the wave will shift to actually extracting information from the resulting output of these systems. So informatics is a loose term. It is analysis of information, is the way I think of it, or information analytics, if you will. Now, what is information? And if you consider images to be information, then you are squarely in computer vision AI. If you consider the decision as information, then you are more in the health space. And so the outcomes of machine decision making and the clinical decision support systems, which include images, would have a greater impact. So you'll see more papers of that. That's the area you'll see more work. Right now, all the informatics papers that are to do with decision-making support are either analyzing text records, be it from CDC or CMS, or which has to do with drug and outcomes of drugs, or outcomes of hospitals with the patient stays, the costs thereof. Because there you are looking at tabular data. Now, one of the columns may be coming in the future from a CAD system. The CAD system, as you pointed out, is not routinely a part of the clinical care. It is something that a human eventually reads, and the human says, this is it. It becomes a column. But we have no information in there that says that a machine advised the human in making this decision. At some point, we expecting automated fill-up of the health record from machine decision making. And at that point, you'd see. So I think again, imaging informatics in its first few years of being recognized. Although Society for Imaging Informatics would be very upset if I said this, because they've been around for 20 plus years. But they are still into training people to use, and last year they had an entire session which had 4 invited speakers on radiologists talking about CAD systems. So essentially acknowledging that image processing, machine learning, deep learning particularly, is coming to some degree of maturity where they'll have to deal with it, because the hospitals are going to challenge human cost eventually. So how does a machine play into human expertise in aiding better decision making? That's where informatics will play a role.
Thank you. Let's thank our keynote speaker.
Thank you for your time and attention.
And Dr. Antani is going to be available during the break.
Yes, I'm here. I'm also. You have one more question? Last slide. Oh, sure. Google me. Seriously, just look at my name and Google me. This is grey enough at this point, and I speak well of all the grey people in the room.